with us. And could you tell us a little bit about your background, how you got started in quilting, and the things that you aspire to do as a quilter?
Yes, Kat, yes. I actually grew up in Kentucky, and I was the oldest girl in a family of 10, 5 girls and 5 boys. And we did not have any quilts when I was growing up. In fact, I did not even know what a quilt was. And I stumbled upon a quilt store about 20 years ago. And I was looking for some handwork to do because it was a very stressful time in my life, and someone told me to go to this quilt store. Anyway, I walked in and saw all these beautiful quilts and just fell in love with the store, the owner, everything. And at that time, I did not even know what a rotary cutter was, what a quilting ruler was, or anything. I mean, I was definitely a beginner. But I signed up for a class in October. By December, I owned a sewing machine, and I've been quilting ever since.
That's wonderful. Can you share with us a little bit more about the types of quilt and the type of quilting that you actually do?
Yes. At the very beginning, now I'm pretty much of a hard charger, like to get things done. And when I first started quilting, I took on a lot of handwork quilts. And the handwork is where we actually do applique, where you cut out pieces of fabric and then you sew them on top of pieces of fabric. And I did several of those. And then after the first year or two, I kind of backed off and went into different types of quilt patterns, like log cabin blocks and the flying geese and other things. And then for the past 5 years, though, I have really been interested again back into the applique and working with different material. I actually like working with wool, so I'll do some cut out wool pieces and fuse them onto cotton pieces, and then you sew around them. So that's been what I've been working, the type of quilting that I have been working on for the past couple of years.
Oh, nice. Now, when you say you fuse them together, I know that you can actually felt cotton, silk, and wool and other natural fabrics. Do you felt them, or do you fuse them with a certain other, like, fusing material?
No, most of the wool that I buy from the quilt stores is already felted.
Okay.
And so, but you have to apply an adhesive.
Okay.
It's called fusible web, but there is an adhesive that you can apply to the wool so that it will then fuse onto your cotton material.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. Now, so how do you describe yourself? What describes yourself as a quilter? And maybe help our viewers see kind of what it means to be a quilter? Does it include artistic pieces? Do you go mostly for handmade? Do you use any of the quilting machines?
Well, honestly, when I grew up, when I was in high school, I always thought about being an art teacher. Okay, that didn't happen. But I consider myself now an art teacher, but I'm teaching quilt art. And actually, because the quilts that I like to do, I like to do all aspects of quilting, from going into the shop or picking out the fabrics, picking out the pattern that I'm going to use, picking out the colors. That's all artistic parts of it. And then putting the quilt together. But the best part is giving it to a family, giving it to a relative, giving it to a stranger. That is one of the best parts of quilting that I love.
Oh, so. Yes, that sounds nice. I enjoy going down to Rooster Creek in Holt Summit. It's near where I live, and I like to go look at the quilting material, and I do sew a little bit, and I get lost in it. It's such a variety, and there's so many different patterns, and it's so nice to see a little bit of a pattern for everybody. What are some of your favorite colors and patterns?
Well, I'd have to say that I tend to go towards greens and browns and oranges. If you look at my fabric stash at home, there will be a lot of the orange and greens, earth tones, but also I like to go on the wild side. I like the bright colors a lot. So And as far as a favorite pattern, you know, as I think I'm like almost any quilter. You walk in and you see a beautiful piece of artwork, a quilt hanging someplace, or a friend just showed you one that she completed, and then you just, you like it so much, you say, oh, where'd you get the pattern? And then I get the pattern, and then we go make it, and then you find your own colors and so on.
It's especially nice if you know the story behind quilts. And also, then I understand that you do workshops, do you teach, and do you travel? I heard that you travel some for your Quilters Cutting Edge.
Yes, well actually what
Sorry.
I have found over the years is that one thing that quilters do not like to do too much is cut out fabric. And I've always liked to cut out fabric. And I learned a certain technique of cutting out fabric about 15 years, well really within the first 2 years that I started quilting. Someone showed me this technique. I always looked for a book on that technique, could not find one, so I finally decided about 4 or 5 years ago, I decided I'm going to do a book myself. So I was teaching classes on the cutting technique, and I did not have a book at that time, and the students would come back about a couple of weeks later and ask me, do you have a book with this, or do you have instructions or something? I said no. So I finally worked with a graphic designer and put together a book, and it was just printed in May of last year, May of 2017, and it was printed by this wonderful printing company in Springfield, Missouri. So I have been actually out now going to different quilt shows, promoting my book and promoting the cutting technique. Because one thing about quilters, we like to share what we do, and we like to share what we know. And what I have found is that since quilters do not, many quilters do not like to cut out fabric, I have found that, okay, if you learn this technique, you'll soon be cutting less and quilting more, because this technique takes about half the time. It saves some steps of the way that many quilters cut. So I've had, I was just in a quilt show in Jefferson, Texas, and I have to share this just for a minute, because after I did my demonstration, the lady who I was demonstrating to, she stood there and she looked at me and she says, wow, I feel like I've been at a magic show. And I said, yes, that's what it's all about, because they're amazed that they haven't seen this cutting technique, and they want to learn it. So I'm willing to teach it to them.
That just sounds really terrific about the Quilters Cutting Guide, and I'm really looking forward to your demonstration. So if people want to find out about your book, do you have contact information, like a website or something that you would like to share with them?
Yes. The name of my website is the same name of the book, and the name of the book is Quilters Cutting Guide. So my website is www.quilterscuttingguide.com. And on the website, I do have a video tutorial, or tutorial video, so that, you know, we learn in different ways. If you learn by reading and looking at pictures, that's in my book. But if you learn more by actually watching someone do it, then you can watch me again on my video that's on my website. And I'll be seeing their expressions. And the thing is that the book is for beginners and experienced quilters. It's for beginners, you know, who are still new at learning how to, beginners have not, they haven't got the old habits, as I call them, or bad habits. I mean, we all have our bad habits and our good habits, you know. But what I found is that they learn it this way to start with, and then the experienced quilters, though, they can appreciate it, because they can appreciate what a difference it is and how much time it does save.
That's really wonderful. Now, when we return, we'll have a special treat today. Deborah's going to show her technique to us with a demonstration here. And I'd like to once again say thanks to our sponsor, Rooster Creek Company in Holt Summit, Missouri. So we'll come back and you'll be finding out how to save time with Deborah's technique. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
My name is Deborah Rubles, and I live in Lebanon, Missouri. And I've written a book called The Quilters Cutting Guide. And this book was just printed in May of 2017. And it shows a cutting technique that will soon have you cutting less and quilting more. And today I'm going to give you a short demonstration about the book, how the book works. I put it in spiral ring because the plan is that it's a cutting tool, not just a book. You would open it up to the page you need, open it up, put it at the top of your cutting mat, and then you would do your cutting. So before we do our cutting, or before I do the demonstration, I want to show you how I prepare my fabric. Because part of cutting out fabric is getting organized and getting prepared to cut the fabric. And if you take the few extra minutes that it involves, then you will be getting your cutting done much faster. And the first the first chapter in the book actually talks about preparing your fabric. So I'm going to use this fabric today, and this fabric is folded in half, like when you buy it at the fabric store, and then I just fold it in half again. So when you cut through this fabric, we're cutting through 4 layers of fabric. I'm right-handed, so I fold in the fabric from the right-hand side. And I like doing this because this keeps the fabric much more manageable, easier to cut. I don't like cutting all those big pieces where you have to stretch it all out on your cutting mat. So my fabric has been pressed and folded. Now the first thing we have to do is we have to get the square edge or that straight edge to cut from. I use the 2-ruler method, and this again is a method that I would say few quilters actually use to square their fabric. And this is explained in chapter 2 of my book of how to square the fabric with 2 rulers. So I have 2 rulers. I have a small one and a big one, and the big one's a 15-inch square. The small one is a 6-inch by 12-inch rectangle. And what I'll do is that I will line up a dark line of the small ruler. So I talk about either the 1-inch line or the 2-inch line. I will line one of those dark lines up on the fold of the fabric. And that's one thing I forgot to tell you is that when you put your fabric on the cutting mat, you always want to make sure that the fold is at your belly. The fold's at your belly. So now to square it, I'm going to line up a dark line of the small ruler on the fold. I'm going to hold it. I'm going to pick this one up and bring it over, and then I'm going to cut. And I have found that using the 2 rulers to square your fabric, it's faster, it's quick. You don't have to pick up the fabric and turn it around. You don't have to pick up your cutting mat, nor do you have to walk around the table. Because I've seen that in all aspects of when the ladies are getting their square edge. They do a little bit of all of it. But anyway, it's just a different technique, and you can learn it if you're willing to try something different. So let's say now we have our fabric square. Let's say we have to cut some binding strips. And I think I like using 2.5-inch strips for my binding. And I think that's a common measurement that most quilters like to use. So let's say we need 5 strips of 2.5-inch binding. So the way the book works, this is when you now go to the Quilters Cutting Guide. You will open it up, and if you notice, there's tabs on the book. So you go to the 2-inch tab, open that page, and then you can turn the pages till you find 2.5 inches up at the top. This is where I've done the math for you, tried to make it as easy as possible. So, and I skipped it. There's a 2.5-inch page. And then I usually, like I said, open it up, put the top of my cutting mat. I made these numbers big so that I can see the numbers clearly as I'm cutting. You see 3 columns. And the book consists of these charts and 5 chapters of instructions at the beginning. But the main purpose of the whole book is to provide these charts for you where I've done the math for you. So you have 3 columns of numbers. The first column is the number of strips needed. And what did I say? We said we needed 5. So you go down, you find the number 5. And then you go across and it says cut on 12.5 inches. And what that means is that's where we're going to start cutting. And says cut on 12.5. So we're actually going to find 12.5 inches on our big ruler. And this is why it's important to have a 15-inch square ruler too. So we find the 12.5-inch measurement mark on the ruler, and we're going to line that up with that straight edge. At the same time, I'm looking down, and I'll line a dark line up in that fold at the bottom. Because all quilters know you need 2 points to have a straight cut. So this is a straight point, this is a straight point. I've got a straight line there, and then I'm going to hold the ruler and I'm going to cut. So that's my first cut. Now the next thing is, all you do is go down the chart. So the next number going down the chart is 10, and you simply slide the ruler over. That's why I call it the sliding ruler method. You slide the ruler over to the 10. So the 10 on the ruler is now lined up with that straight edge, and also have a line on the fold. And then you cut. Next number is 7.5. Slide it over, and you put the 7.5 on that straight edge, and you cut. Next number is 5. Slide it over, and cut. And the last number at the bottom is our 2.5-inch strip. So what I have done is I have just cut my 5 strips in no time, while some of you may still be squaring up your fabric, but I've got my 5 strips done. Now, this is for binding. Now, just to carry this forward a little bit more, you know how a lot of your patterns call for a whole bunch of 2.5-inch squares. So this last column, this third column, is what I call a bonus column. And this is a number of squares that you need or you will get out of the strips you cut. You know, let's say you have a pattern that tells you that you need to cut 48 2.5-inch squares. So in this column, you would go down and find the number 48 or the number closest to it. So here's 48, and that tells you that you need 3 strips 2.5 inches wide to get 48 2.5-inch squares. Okay, so we need 3 strips, and let me show you how we're going to cut those, because again, we want to get our cutting done so that we can go start sewing or do more fun things. So I'm going to pull 2 of these off, and I have 3 strips left. And all I'll do is swing them around and line them up on a line on my cutting mat. So there's one, there's my second one. Remember, we cut 3 to get our 48. So there's my 3. You need to square it, so we're going to square on the left side. Hold it, and there's my straight edge. Now, we're going to cut these into 2.5-inch squares. So this fabric is approximately 10.5 inches wide. So you look at the big numbers to see where you can start cutting at, and you want to cut on the number that's closest to 10.5 inches. So we'll go down, we're going to start cutting on 10. And that means that we're going to find the 10 on the ruler and line it up on that straight edge. And also I'm lining a line up at the bottom, and then you cut. Then you go down the chart, the next number is 7.5, so slide the ruler over, put the 7.5 on that straight edge, and cut. The next number is 5, slide the ruler over on the 5, and cut. And the last one is 2.5 inches. So what I just did was cut 3 2.5-inch strips into 48 squares. And if you don't believe me, look, there's my 48 squares. Okay, remember we're cutting through 4 layers at a time, so there's our 48 squares. So that's what the book is all about. As I said earlier, the book includes, it just has 5 chapters at the front of instructions. And the instructions include instructions for left-handed and right-handed, because of course if you're left-handed, you're holding the rulers and the rotary cutter differently. So I have pictures showing you of how and where to cut and how to hold the rulers and so on. And then I have a couple more chapters with the pictures, and then the rest of the book is charts. I have a website, www.Quilters Cutting Guide, and on that website you can actually purchase my book. There's also a tutorial video there on it. So if you learn from reading the book, you can read it, or you can watch me again do the demo. That's Deborah Rubles. I'm at Lebanon, Missouri, with the Quilters Cutting Guide. Thank you.
Miss Rubles, that was a great demonstration. Welcome back, everyone, to Quilting Inside and Out. That was Deborah Rubles showing us about Quilters Cutting Guide. And I'm sure some of our viewers that do quilting are interested in a little bit about her also, her personal background, and also make sure to say hi to maybe your favorite person.
Okay, well, I live in Lebanon, Missouri, and I'm actually what many people call transplants, because I grew up in Kentucky, and the Army is what brought me to Missouri. The Army brought me to Missouri in the early 70s, where I met my husband, where my daughter was born. And then 20 years later, when we were done traveling with the Army, we decided to live in Missouri. We've always loved, when we first came to Missouri, we loved it. We've loved it since, and Missouri is now my home. But my husband, he passed away in 2008 after fighting a hard battle with cancer. But about 2 years after that, I met this, a true Missourian, a man who grew up in Lebanon, Missouri, and we've now been married for 8 years. So it's been a wonderful time, and Missouri has been, I mean, it's my hometown, it's my home state now, and it's brought me many treasures and everything. And I did want to give a shout out, if I may.
Sure, go right ahead.
Happy Valentine's Day, Mr. Rubles. That's it.
That's great. I really want to thank you personally, and I can't wait to try this technique myself. Here on Quilting Inside and Out, we're just so glad that you could come and show us how to do that. It's been informational, and I'm looking forward to even checking out your book too.
All right.
So now the scoop on World of Quilting. The Hannibal Peacemakers Quilt Guild is having their next show around the block. It's on Friday, April the 6th and Saturday, April the 7th. The Rooster Creek Quilt Show is going to be in Holt Summit, Missouri on a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, July 12th, 13th, and 14th. Also, the Peacemakers of Springfield, Missouri have dates for a quilt show, and it is on September 27th through the 29th of this year. Cape Girardeau, Missouri will host their quilt show on September 29th and 30th. So please contact Rooster Creek Company in Holt Summit. Their phone number is 573-694-4789. Once again, that number is 573-694-4789. Let them know the scoop so we can pass the information along and bring it to you here on Quilting Inside and Out. So thanks to JCTV producer Gloria Inlow and the JCTV Access staff and crew. A big thank you to everyone joining us here on JCTV. Look for more episodes here at JCTV and on YouTube. All you have to do is search for JCTV and watch their videos. It's all right here on JCTV. I'm Kathleen Dake, and I'll see you next time on Quilting Inside and Out.